Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media, virtual production, anything that comes up in those areas. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little more time on, and we spend a lot of time talking about education on Saturdays. So we will have we start doing mic checks for the educators at 8. We finish a little before 10 a.m. And then at 10 a.m., we're going to come back on YouTube. That part's off YouTube. We're going to come back on YouTube, talk about Keynote and live video in Keynote specifically. So we'll be talking about that in the third hour as we come up. So stay tuned for that. And now I'm going to hand this off to our Saturday host, Emily Russo. Take it away, Emily.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Just want a quick reminder that we will be taking your questions, answering them. So make sure that you're putting those into Mukana. And even if you don't think you have a great question, you can vote on the questions there. So it determines what order we answer those questions in based on your interest level. So please go to Mukana. Make sure you do that. I'm a little slow today for some reason. So let's jump into the questions.
TJ Asher from Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's time for me to upgrade my background lights to something that won't have the flicker with the camera. Recommendations on something reasonably priced that connects to mains power and has remote control. Bonus for DMX controllable.
Ken.
Aperture have released a cheaper range of their panel lights. I think they're I'll put the link in the description. They're about $300, brilliant color that they have, similar to these. The only difference is they're just a bit less power. The only negative on there is that they don't have DMX control. You can remote control them via the Sidus link, but DMX isn't part of it. The DMX, you have to go up to the more expensive range for that.
TJ?
Hey, Ken, are those large lights or smaller ones? Because I guess I'm maybe focusing on some smaller lights just as the accent lighting behind me.
Yeah, they're perfect for the accent lighting. They're not, they're about that size, about 8-9 inches, I think, across for those.
All right. And Alex.
Yeah, I think the Aperture ones, if you don't need DMX, I think the Aperture ones probably have the best controls, the software control for them. And I have some, I don't have them, I don't think within arm's reach, but I have a couple of them that just screw into standard lighting fixtures that I have taken on the road. So for backgrounds in my hotel, I just swap out the lights in the hotel for the ones that I brought. So those work really well. I've been pretty happy with them. And so that's something to look at. Once you get to DMX, I feel like the best ones at a relatively low price, but they're going to be a lot more, are still going to be the Nan light. I have the mixed panel 60 behind me. And of course, that's DMX controllable. The advantage of having DMX is that you can do things like get a DMX King or NTEC controller and then use things like Isadora and other things to control, have kind of a raw control over the light. Whereas if you have something that's merely remote controllable, you can definitely do that, but the connection to the light is a lot more complicated.
Interesting. All right. Next question.
Matt Cool of Montreal, Quebec. I just read that WGBH in Boston has asked remote contributors to use Zoom instead of Skype. Is this the beginning of the Zoom takeover?
David?
I don't know if it's the beginning of the Zoom takeover. That probably happened about 2 years ago. But a lot of media companies are swinging towards Zoom, probably for the lower barrier to entry for bringing remote contributors in. The only thing I've seen in a few is it doesn't have the clean input. So I've seen the person's identity and the recording symbol and the bars and all that stuff on stuff that has hit air. So still ways to go, but it's getting there.
John?
Yeah, from my experience, seeing it a lot with like Cheddar or Yahoo News, they're only accepting really Zoom. For what we do for remote participation, we're getting a lot of LTN still for any of the major networks.
Alex?
Yeah, there's definitely a rate that's higher if you kind of think about how to connect to the networks. Most networks have given up on satellite because it's really slow. There's a lot of latency in it. The switch is the kind of the high bar. It's very low latency and very high quality. You can turn it all the way up to uncompressed if you want, and you're running at 50 milliseconds a leg. So it's really, really high quality, but very expensive. 2 or 3 times as much as LTN. LTN is something we use all the time, and it is a more cost-effective way to do it. Still more expensive than Zoom. I think $150 a minute or an hour to run it. So it still costs some money. And then in the consumer realm, we're seeing more and more Zoom, especially folks who understand they use Zoom ISO. So once they use Zoom ISO, they can get a clean aperture out of Zoom. So if anybody screen scraping Zoom is going to still have debris, across the, on the bottom and the top, but ISO will send it out without any of the debris. And so that's what we're seeing more of. Skype is really difficult to work with. Or has been. I think that Teams is getting better, but Skype itself has been becoming more and more painful because it used to be everybody had a Skype account. Now it's this huge lift to have someone get the Skype account, get in there, be able to find them in Skype. There's all these things that used to be something that was really simple that stopped being simple on the Skype side. And so we moved from Skype to Zoom maybe a year and a half ago. But we were using Skype completely and 100%. Zoom was something we did with office hours, but we still use Skype for all of our production. And then there was some update that made it much harder, and we just gave up.
Rupert?
Yeah, and with Zoom putting so much investment and attention towards production pipelines, you've just, I think, got some folks in production there that are looking at Zoom pipelines more seriously with the features yet to come. You've got all the video SDK stuff that's in the pipeline with Jumpstart for Zoom and all those things. And Skype, I don't know, but I could suspect that might get rolled more towards the Teams for personal, whatever that platform is. So Skype may go a different direction in the future, and Zoom is obviously putting some attention in directions they want to go.
David?
Yeah, just wanted to add, our group has changed calling them satellite media tours to Zoom media tours, and that's how we conduct them.
Alex?
That's great. I have to admit that compared to satellite media tours, I've done a lot of SMTs. The ZMTs are way better because when we do ZMTs, we do it in breakout rooms. And so what we do is we have the artist or the VIP in one breakout room. But then we have multiple breakout rooms for the next few groups of people coming in. Now, the ones that we've done primarily have been music. So it's an artist that's going to talk to a bunch of folks that, one after the other, like this group and then this, a Pandora group and a Spotify group and everything else. And what's great is that we have these breakouts. We drop them into those breakouts. And there's a person that's greeting them when they walk in. Hey, how's it going? Where are you from? And put them in the right place, right? And so they can all sit there and talk, waiting for the artist. Then we just drag the artist into each room, along the way, just to go down to have that conversation. And it just seems so civilized compared to the chaos that we had with SMTs, just be able to drag them along and have it all work. And it's just a great experience. And so I would highly recommend it. I think that what is missing, and I think that Zoom will probably pay more attention to it, is the Skype TX solution. That's what kept a lot of broadcasters, tied in, is that this turnkey. I can get 4 channels of it. I can just push it in. And I think that what you're seeing with Office Hours 2.0 is us showing that we can do that now. It's just a matter. I think that actually if someone just cobbled something together, they could probably sell it as a hardware device without very much new things to some broadcasters.
All right. Next question.
Ray Harwood of Avondale, Arizona. DMX control is new for me, and I'm starting to acquire some additional lighting, not just for my office, but for accent lighting around the home too. Does anyone do anything fancy with DMX at home other than change the color and intensity?
Alex?
So what I have done with DMX, and I'm updating currently with Isadora, which I keep on thinking I'm going to get to it, but I haven't gotten to it in the last couple of weeks, is I have these little cheaper lights. I think I have one. These ones, I think you might have seen it. These ones here, these are like $20 each or whatever. And what I actually use them for, the reason I bought them is that my family takes lip sync very, very seriously. And so I actually have a hazer and those lights specifically for I couldn't grab the photos. But what I'm working on right now is getting Isadora to analyze the audio coming in and play different colors and flashing based on the audio of the song that my kids are doing lip sync to. So so if you're looking for something totally over the top, that's a good birthday party trick, just in case you're wondering.
Jeffrey.
Yeah, I'm kind of doing something similar. Of course, I have a band, and so in the basement right now, the basement is where all those DMX lights are sitting. And every now and then I'll go down and kind of fine tune them to make sure that they'll work when we go to play. Other than that, I've done DMX lighting outside the house, highlighting certain parts of the house when it's not snowing out, and so you can definitely use that for that type of stuff.
It's funny. It reminds me, Stevie has his Google Home set up. So then when he says night night in his house, the lights dim. He has 3 kids under the age of 9. And so the lights dim and music starts playing, and the kids are like Pavlov's dogs. They just like fall over. Like they're like, no. And they just fall over and go to sleep. So I think you might be able to do something like that. But anywho, next question.
Lois Richter, Davis, California. In our birding project, we'll have to show panelists who range from park rangers to professors to local Audubon leaders to birding tour guides to people with special credentials. Should their affiliation be included in their identification?
TJ.
I would ask the panelist if you are doing a lower third that is going to identify their name, ask them if they want to have something as their identification or to show their credential or whatever it is. Try to keep it simple to like 1 perhaps, so that if a person has lots of degrees or whatever, just pick 1 certification or thing that makes them special and applicable to the birding.
Alex.
Yeah, I would agree that I'd put something up there and again try to coach them on keeping it relatively short. We have found that the people that are the most important care the least amount about their second line. so a lot of them are like, oh, I don't need anything, or you can just put something else in. And we usually know that they mean business, but at the same time, it's important for the viewers to know who they are and where they're coming from. So I think that it makes sense.
And for the people without special credentials, maybe enthusiast under their name.
Yeah.
All right. Next question.
John Snyder from Reno, Nevada. What's one skill in your industry that novices should have but often don't?
Ooh, good question. Ken.
In my field of web design, surprisingly, CSS. There's so much reliance on libraries and things like that. So a full knowledge of CSS is the issue.
John?
For me, like just simple troubleshooting through the OSI model. Like always start with physical, work your way up, understand where issues could come from. It's going to lead to much faster resolutions of any issues.
Nice. Rupert.
Risk management.
TJ?
Like John, the ability to troubleshoot, to look at a problem and work your way step by step through all the process to try to identify what is causing the problem.
Jeffrey.
For me, for any type of musician stuff, or for, of course, for video, cable wrapping. That's the one thing that it always gets me that somebody just doesn't know how to do.
Alex?
I will agree with Jeffrey. One of the ones I had was definitely cable wrapping. Oftentimes, if someone's new, I'll hand them a cable without saying anything. I say, can you roll this up and put it over there? I'm watching. It's kind of like the Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison used to take people out to lunch when he was going to hire them, and he would hire or fire them looking at whether they added salt and pepper before or after they took the first bite. Like literally, if they added salt and pepper before the first bite, he wouldn't hire them because it meant that they were making assumptions before they did observations. And so anyway, in the same way, I hand someone a cable and then I make a real big decision about whether they're in the producer realm or whether they're operators. So that's kind of if they do that, if they do what Mitchell just did, I will not hire them for that position. So anyway, the biggest skill that I would have is just I think I would say just being accountable, like being on time, being attentive, being like, we get people who the social media is like a poison, for young folks, because they just sit there and they're on their social, like if you're on your social media during an event, and I don't think it has to do specifically with my event, I'm probably not going to hire you again. That's kind of like, that's how that kind of turns out. I mean, you have to be off site to get on social media to do that. So those are the kind of things that we pay a lot of attention to.
David.
Yeah, not so much a skill until it's developed, more of a trait, but that would be humility and a thick skin.
Yeah. So over under, I would pass my cable wrapping test. I've learned how to do that very quickly, and now I do it with everything.
And it's even your headphones. You can always tell like when someone's really serious because you'll see them do it. I do over under with my headphones, just sitting there like.
Yeah, all of my cables, every single cable for my computer is over undered, and then hoses over undered. Anyway, but then the other thing too that you guys brought up, it's good, is in addition to the humility and the ability to like be involved, it's like when the person asks, can I help? Like they may not know how to do something, but if you just stand there and watch me struggle, like I'm not looking to work with you again. But if you're like, I don't know what you need me to do, but if you tell me what to do, I can help. Like, let me help. Like those people are the ones that are going to go above and beyond every single time, and not just stand on the side and be like, it's not my problem. So,
and that's really a state of mind, like it's one of those things. Like if I see someone in a plane that I just think is going to have a hard time putting their bag up above, I immediately just offer to help. Like, can I just help put this up? It keeps now for me, it keeps the line moving. But it also just is it's just a layer of service that is both, just nice to have, but I think it's a state of mind that you want to keep all the time.
Yeah, exactly. All right, next question.
Rupert McRae from Dallas, Texas says, what are the accessibility challenges caused by virtual backgrounds?
Ken.
I remember hearing Laura talk about this. It's the flickering between the edge of where they've got the virtual background and then the edges around them. But it's not just, I don't think that's just not for accessibility issue. For everybody, seeing that is just a distraction. You just cannot focus on what they're saying. You're just looking at, especially if they've got their hands up and then it's the backgrounds flickering between. It's the edges flickering is the particularly accessibility issue, but I think it's a major issue for everyone because it's a major distraction.
Alex?
Yeah, I agree with Ken that it's a distraction for everyone, but I think with folks with low visibility might have trouble keeping track of what's actually happening, in front of them. So I think that's an important piece of the puzzle.
Rupert?
I bring it up because we had an interesting actually discussion yesterday in the Zoom test kitchen about this whole thing, and this was something that came up, and what Ken said and what we've said here were examples that were given. I also thought that, if you have a gallery, let's say of 10, 20, 30 people, all with, the same branded virtual background, which is the look a lot of people are going for, if you don't have complete vision, perhaps, it actually becomes more difficult to tell who's who because everybody looks so similar. They've all got these branded backgrounds, and so you're diminishing your ability to tell the difference in your panel of who's who. Also, we did test, at least yesterday, that putting in a virtual background did drop a 1080p video down to 720. So maybe there's some other consideration there too.
Interesting. All right, next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas, asks, some podcasts include video, so can also be watched. Some podcasts are audio only. Can the panel comment on their preferences for either format, from either a production point of view or a listener-viewer?
John.
For me, I prefer audio only. I'm typically listening in the car or it's in the background as I'm working. So video I don't watch often. If it is well produced, I will catch myself watching that instead of maybe a TV show if it's some content I really enjoy.
Ken.
Yeah, from a search engine optimization point of view, having podcasts on YouTube has a big helps in the reachability of the podcast. So that's what people have. And also it's a free platform to host it on. So that's why people have both.
TJ?
From a production point of view, doing video is exponentially more difficult, takes up more size, just a whole lot more compared to audio. And from a listener viewer point of view, most of my podcasts that I listen to are audio, and I'm listening at least 1.5 times normal speaking speed. So it's really weird to hear Alex here talking in 1.0. And then, but there's only one podcast that I actually watch on video.
Jeffrey.
Yeah, I've done audio and I've done video podcasts for many years now. I had a podcast called The Day in Tech History, which was just basically a rundown of what happened today in tech history. And I would have never done that in a video format. That would have been boring as all heck. I know that Tom used to be on Twit. He did something as well like that, but he did it in a more visual format than what I did. And if I was to have made that same thing, they would be two different types of shows. So yeah, it's perfect for anybody that's in the car or out and listening on their headphones. Don't need the visuals. And the same token is if you've got a video podcast and you're putting it into the audio format, a lot of problems that I see is people doing stuff on screen like showing products and not explaining it well enough for an audio audience to understand what's going on.
Alex?
Yeah, so I've done a couple video podcasts and a couple audio podcasts. The audio podcasts are 95% of the audience. So I think that we put them out that way, but I think that it's really expensive as well. So if you don't have a sponsor, so all the Mac Break stuff that we did for years was all sponsored by CashFly. They provided that as a service. So you'll see a lot of those podcasts are brought to you by CashFly. So because CashFly made that available. If they hadn't made it available, and before that it was Libsyn, and Libsyn did the same thing for us. If we had to pay Libsyn for the amount of data. In fact, there was one podcast that we did of the Apple Hi-Fi or something. We went down and covered it. They had literally had to take it off their servers because it was burning up a gig a second, for them to, just that one video. So video becomes a thing. And I think that really a lot of us got into that before YouTube was really a thing. So people who lean towards a video-based system tend to lean towards YouTube. So just go ahead and put it up on YouTube, get subscribers. I don't think that podcasting video, unless you're, like it said, podcasting for an internal company or something like that. There's a company called UStudio that does that, but I think otherwise it's pretty complicated. So I think that internal company communication that needs to be distributed, that people can subscribe and see tips and tricks on how to do something or get lessons or something like that, that has a viable reason to do that. Because it's your own servers, it's your own systems. You want to have security, you want to have those types of things. You can't put it on YouTube. So the kind of stuff that the companies that use UStudio do are companies that might make sense for. But for publicly facing, I think that YouTube is the right way to go for if you're going to do video, and then have like what we're about to do. Really is we still have the YouTube piece, but we're about to start posting these as podcasts, at least a highlight or even all of them, so that you can listen to it. That we're not going to post a video in podcasting. We're just going to put the videos up on YouTube.
TJ?
And one more thing to keep in mind is if you are doing something geared toward video, your audience can only be doing that really at that time. If you were doing something that's targeted as audio, I can go for a walk and listen to my audio podcast, or I can jog or be doing whatever while simultaneously listening to the podcast.
Yeah, we call that monotasking. We try not to force people to do that.
Yeah, I've been doing my pilot training where I watch the videos, and then you can listen to it. So then when I go for my walks, I listen and try to mime out what happened in the video so that I can ingrain it in my head. But yeah, they don't always do a great job, even though they have the audio only version. They don't explain some things. It's just a video or an image. And I'm like, oh, I think this is where they had the plane with the circles around it. So anyway, all right. Now, before we get to our next question, just wanted to let you guys know that we're running a little low on questions. So if you have anything that you want to throw in Mukana, make sure you do that for us. And let's go ahead and move on to our next question.
Lois Richter, Davis, California, USA. I have a friend whose music I use to open and close my TV and radio shows. I have her permission to do that. Margie Adam is a musician with several albums published Who do I notify for the YouTube that I have her permission? How do I notify them?
Ooh, this is going to be one. David.
Well, that's okay. Dave or David is fine by me. The answer is in that question. The publisher is the one that you need to reach out to and get permission. The other thing you could do is reach out to the artist and have them craft a song unique to your show, and that way you should be in the clear.
Alex?
Yeah, it's even more complicated because you have to go out to the publisher, whoever owns the copyright, and it's not who owns the copyright. It's who's registered the copyright in YouTube. Will have a CMS on the back end. And what they have to do, it's not you knowing or them agreeing or any kind of paperwork. It is they have to go into their own CMS that manages their copyrights. They have to select your channel and they have to clear list that channel, with that it can play that specific song in there. And so there's a little bit of work on their end. And oftentimes the hardest part is getting to the right person who knows how to do it. It's gotten way better. When we started this, it was really funny because we were just constantly it was an intern that was there for a year that created their YouTube account that is no longer there. And they don't have any way to get in. It's gotten better, but it still takes a little bit. We usually give it weeks to process that. To give you a sense of it, for big music festivals that YouTube is involved with, that can sometimes take up to 6 months. For all the songs, for all the bands, for all the it literally just working through that process takes months.
Jeffrey?
And there is another factor that's involved. I had a show a long time ago called The 5 Tech Things, and I used a song from a band called The Pimps of Joy Time, which was a great song, and it was licensed by this one PR company. So I got it all cleared to do, and of course I ran the show. It was expirable content, so that the watching it now would be kind of pointless. But I didn't take them down off of YouTube because it's still a way to get people into my channel. But a couple of years ago, I got a whole bunch of flags because the original licensing company had switched hands, went to a different licensing company. So you just got to watch out for anything that you have on your YouTube a couple of years ago to make sure if the licensing does switch hands that you might go through this whole process again.
Alex?
I'll pass my time.
All right. Well, I have a follow-up question. Do you guys think that it'll ever change the music thing? Because I know that when I was explaining the copyright to teachers and I met with a copyright lawyer who explains image copyright versus music copyright, the music copyright was so complicated. It was
And again, teachers technically, if they're only using a piece of it, technically fair use means that they can use it. They just can't put it on YouTube. They can't. So if they have a private way to post the videos, then they're outside of that. And I think that they're legally in the clear of fair use within an educational process. So it's trickier when you get outside of that. I don't think that it'll get any better. The copyright holders are a little bit. They have their wagons circled a bit. Because they just, this whole new thing has been really complicated. It's been very painful for them. So that's been, kind of one of the challenges there. So I don't know if it'll get any better. The other thing I was going to say, I remember what it was, is that you can also go to a composer and get them you give them a song and say, this is a very classic thing to do, is I want it to be inspired by that song, but not be that song, and get far enough away. A good example, if you listen to Mac Break and then you listen to Jane's Addiction Stop, they sound remarkably similar, but not exactly. So they're it has its own groove to it, but it's still inspired by one thing or another.
And immediately my head goes to Vanilla Ice going do 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 do.
Well, and again, you have to I had a composer very carefully. We're using different chords. We're using different there's a whole bunch of things that we changed to make that work. But if you knew both songs, you'd know where it came from, but it won't. And there's tons of that in the music industry where people shift a couple things and use it. And I don't know if there's a guy on TikTok that shows you where all these different inspirations for different songs comes from. And it's always there's you think that they're the originals here, but it's 3 more people back, that kind of thing. So
David?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to change. There's money in them there hills. And that's why I think getting a custom song made in Lois's case, if she has a custom song, then she could go after people that might want to use that, potentially.
Yeah. and like the largest corporations we work with have moved away from licensing music. I mean, some of them still license music, but a lot of them they hire a company or a composer to do 10 or 12 songs. And back when they were doing events, in the pre-COVID, in the before times, those 10 or 12 songs is the sound of their event for the next year. And then they'll do another one. And it cost them to do 10 or 12 songs. It cost them $100,000, but it's a lot less than all the licensing, and they can use it in the streams. They can use it everywhere they want to use it. And it's just like, this is the playlist for this year. And then they would change it every year, every 2 years. But every event that they did, like some of these, like if you think about a Facebook, you're talking about 10 or 15,000 events a year. That they don't have that they own all the license. No, I don't know if they do that, but I'm just saying that's a good example of what to think about there.
Rupert?
Tom Scott has a good video on YouTube copyright ins and outs. I'll post a link in Morgana.
Cool. And Jeffrey?
The unofficial 30% copyright rule, which means if you change it 30%, that it can become your own. But that's neither here nor there. It's not a written rule by any means. But the other thing is that, you go to YouTube, you look through the list. There's a lot of songs you can get, and a lot of actual songs that are copywritten. You just can't monetize any of the videos that you're going to use them on, and then you can use them for intros and outros. And there's a lot of companies, a lot of bands that are starting to look at that because they know that it's more of the fact that if they get their audio out there, that they're going to get a little bit more popular. But you just got to find which ones they are, and they're not going to switch over to, all right, you can't use our songs anymore.
Alex?
Endemic audio, endemic sound or endemic audio, they license it for you. So if you use any of the music on that website, it's actually licensed. Epidemic, that's right. I always get it wrong. It's still an epidemic, not an endemic. So epidemic sound, they will license it to you, and it's actually pretty good music. You pay a subscription. Anything you make during your subscription is yours to keep. As soon as your subscription ends, you can't keep on using those. You can't keep putting them on new things. So
interesting. All right, let's go to the next question.
David Brady of New York City, New York. Is there an easy way to telestrate using Windows 10? I have a Dell PT2418HT touchscreen in front of me, and it's routed through ATEM as a source, just trying to get my head around the full signal path and apps needed.
Alex?
Yeah, so the trick is that now I use a separate computer, so I don't have the same computer that I'm using here. So to do this, what I'm doing there is I've got a Mac Mini, cheap old Mac Mini that I'm using. I don't 2012, I think, and it all it's doing is drawing black and white, on top of it. If I cut to it, this is what it's doing. Well, it's black, but it's colored because of the fill. But anyway, so that's all I'm doing, and then I'm keying it over top, to make that work. So it doesn't have to do any of the keying or processing. It doesn't have to get the video. The key is that it outputs that. You can have any drawing app do that. So any PC drawing app that you have that you can push into it can do it. Now what I have is a Wacom tablet. I'm sending the output of the switcher into the Wacom tablet, not into the computer, but into the Wacom tablet. So what I see is the program with the composite in this, from the switcher, if that makes sense. So and then I have the USB control from the Wacom tablet back into the Mac Mini. So I'm controlling the Mac Mini, but seeing the program out from the switcher. And so that combination is and then the output of the Mac Mini goes into the switcher and is used as a keying downstream key. So it's from a computational perspective, it's super easy. I will say the Wacom tablet makes it a lot easier because it has an HDMI input. If I would switch to, and it's $300 or whatever, but it's the Wacom tablet's doing all the work because it's getting the HDMI program feed out of the switcher. You could have theoretically, if you could talk to it, you could have a Raspberry Pi do the other part. It's computationally insignificant. Go buy a used Mac Mini. Any Mac Mini made in the last decade will do the thing. So yeah.
Jeffrey?
So there is a program, I actually reviewed it a couple of years ago. It's called Panimation. It is a full telestrator, and it is also a graphics box as well, and it does NDI, so you can actually bring in your video via NDI, or you can bring, I believe you can also bring in your video straight up, and then of course use that as a telestrator, do an HDMI out into your ATEM from there. It's about $300 if I remember correct. I put the link in Mukana if you want to check it out.
And Ken.
Just a quick question to Alex. Because the telestration software, I mean, I've tried almost all of them. I'm still waiting for the release of his, or maybe you can make it as a special release for us after hours members.
I need to compile it. It's a let me see what I can do. I'm trying to just get it done. It's a little messy. Like you do have to. It works for me. I don't know if I'm ready to hand it out to everybody else because I'm always afraid it'll break. But we can talk about that. Ping me on Discord if someone wants to use it. You just have to know that it comes with a disclaimer that it's not really, it's not 100% stable. I really want to turn it into something and put it out on the App Store. It's mostly just me finding a programmer that will sit down and, kind of clean it up and make it work. And I keep on going, I will learn how to program, and that's never going to happen, I don't think. Well enough for me to trust myself. I mean, I hacked a piece of it together, but then I was like, and what you always worry about when you release a product is that you have to now support it. And what I don't want is like 1,001 stars that this broke and it did this thing and everything else. I want it to be like amazing, if it goes out. So that's the goal. So that's what's holding it up anyway. But contact me in Discord. Yeah.
All right, next question.
Jonas Dottel of Stuttgart, Germany. Is there a way to force Rex 709 out of a constellation? Currently only getting 2020.
Alex.
So the way the constellation works, as far as we know, it's not very well documented how it handles color space. You probably found that out. And so what happens is that if it gets a color space that it deems not Rec 2020 in 4K, so if it's 4K and it's Rec 2020 coming in or log, it is highly probable that it'll switch to Rec 2020. If it gets a 709 signal in any of the inputs, what we have found is that it'll switch to 709. So if you pass it a 709 signal, it'll make everything 709. And we believe that 1080 will always be 709. So it only does Rec 2020 in 4K. You may have found, if it's different, let us know. But in the heat of battle, that's what while we were DXing the switcher, that's what we found that it would do. The good news is part of our upgrade for Office Hours 2.0 is I'm getting some signals that will allow us to very properly interrogate the pipeline. These are a company called SRI International that we're going to get their signals soon. And then that's going to really let us just pass through things and just cut through what's actually working and what's actually happening at every setting. So stay tuned for that because we're going to be posting that as we go.
All right, next question.
Morgan Price from Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. Alex, how is the office build going? My holiday maker pipe order made it through the Canada Post this week.
So I'm going out tomorrow to buy some EMT. I ran out of time and money for it. So it got delayed a little bit because I was like, I can't. Here's the problem is that I couldn't do tearing it all apart if I don't have enough cash to do it. I bought some more things for Office Hours 2.0, and that required me to wait a little longer to actually do the build. But I'm going to be working on building the telestrator over the next 2 weeks. So hopefully we'll be able to show you that. It's a little smaller, and I just wanted to do it. I guess my whole thing is I was going to tear my whole office apart. I've been slowly clearing it and getting it ready to go. If I was going to tear the whole office apart, I was like, I better have the money to finish it. But you are going to see me experiment with putting some shelves behind me and some other things just to start to see what it looks like. So I'm not going to do it all at one time. I'm going to be testing little bits and pieces. I also have decided to kind of set a criteria of all the different things I want the room to do. So I want a gray screen. I want a green screen. I want shelving behind me. I want to be able to put a TV behind me. So if I want to just do a virtual background kind of thing. So there's a bunch of different things that I want. And then I figured out the cost, and the cost was a little bit more than I had. So I'm going to, more than my allowance from my boss. So from my home boss, not my work boss. So I'm still working through those things to figure that out.
All right, next question.
Todd Wieser from Fort Walton Beach, Florida. Has there been any professional use of Big Blue Button for live events outside of an educational use?
Hey, Todd. It's good to see you. Sorry.
It's
I
okay.
jumped in.
I was like, the only Big Blue Button use I had was with education, and I hated it. So I don't know if you guys have a better explain it with it, but go ahead, Alex.
Welcome, Todd. I know Todd. So anyway, a lot of us here are building bespoke solutions using Zoom. So that is the most common for most of us to do. And I think there's a lot of event platforms that people will just want to kind of throw on. And some of it has to do with certification. So if you're in a very large organization, you may not want to try to build something from scratch. You want something that has already been certified and run through, for whatever requirements are there. So maybe that's a good example. But we have found that most of these platforms are pretty limited. And the biggest problem that they have, and Emily, you can tell me whether this is the case for what you saw, is the attempt to make it like a physical event. So there's always this thing like we're going to try to fit a physical event into a virtual event, where the virtual event is capable of doing, the virtual event doesn't do a very good physical event. And it's capable of all these new things that are really, really great. And we're not doing any of those things. We're just trying to make it look like the thing that we remembered. And that's what we've seen in almost every virtual platform. I haven't used the Big Blue Button. Emily, is that what was your experience?
Well, in education, it's embedded in Schoology, and I only saw it, at the beginning of the pandemic, and it just was really clunky, really awkward to use. Like it wasn't user friendly in the sense of like the buttons weren't straightforward. You had to kind of play around with it and get comfortable with it before you could use it with students. Whereas I feel like in Zoom, you could just jump in, know what most of the buttons did, change your permission to make sure the kids couldn't write on the screen, and you were pretty much golden. The other thing was that it said that it would auto record so that you could take those videos and put them into your Schoology file so that the kids could go back and watch them later. And those always seemed to have some sort of issue, whether it was recording the wrong place or it jumped or was jittery. And so it just became one of those things where like only two or three teachers like adopted it. And it was mostly because they just wanted to stay inside one thing, whereas all the other teachers went out to Zoom to record and then brought those videos in. But that was just the education. And like I said, that was like almost 2 years ago now. So it may have made some big leaps and bounds like a lot of other platforms, but it was just very awkward. All right. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, if you're establishing long-term residency in a country, would you use a carnet to ship equipment or use another procedure?
Rupert.
I think there's a lot of variables in this question, depending on the locations involved and the jurisdictions and things like that, and whether it's long term or a move, or which companies recognize which countries recognize domicile and all those things. What I can say is that and whether the equipment is your own personal effects or whether it's some commercial equipment or it's a business entity involved, there's all kinds of variables. When I shipped a whole bunch of stuff from the UK to the US, I can give you that example from personal experience. I just enrolled a freight forwarder to take care of it for me. I had a whole load of stuff in storage in the UK. I rented an equivalent storage unit here in the US, and I engaged them and I said, I want that stuff put in this unit. And they sent me some paperwork to fill out and they took care of it. One of the forms was a supplemental declaration of unaccompanied effects, if that helps. So but it really does help to have somebody just take care of it for you.
Alex?
Yeah, a carnet is generally something that you are promising to take into the country and then promising to take it out, typically within a year. So if you're going to leave it there for longer than a year, that's just importing, and then you go through customs. So if you're a residency, doesn't necessarily help. In fact, it can actually hinder it because they're not looking for you to go there with the equipment and stay. The carnet is, the idea is you're not paying customs because you're not leaving it there. You're bringing it in for a conference or a job or whatever, and then you're leaving again. So that's the anyway. That's how that works.
All right. Next question.
Todd Wieser for Walton Beach, Florida asks, has anyone on the panel used SpaceX Starlink for streaming video?
Ken.
I have the order. It's being fulfilled. So watch this space, and I'll do some tests with it. I know there's supposed to be obviously latency with the because it's from the way that it works. But yeah, I do have one coming very soon. So watch this space.
Alex.
I have some friends that have been testing it, and the big thing is that they need to have a higher buffer so that it can catch it on the way up, because it does fluctuate a little bit. So it's a higher buffer, and then a lot of them are using some version of forward error correction, FEC. Now that can be in the form of SRT. Most of the folks that I've talked to that have been the most successful have been using Zixi, Zixi wrapper with an encode and decode. With that and increasing the Zixi buffer to over 5 seconds, or at about 5 seconds, that has been pretty clean. The only thing that they've had is that it's still in beta and it drops out it just disappears for an hour. Like it's like, okay, I'm not here anymore. So it's not but when it works, we're talking 1080p 60, 1080p 30, rock solid, with some buffer delay. So there is by adding a little bit of latency to it, they're finding that it's working at low latency. It's pretty unforgiving.
Rupert?
Yeah, exactly. I was going to make the point between the question asks about streaming video. Of course, with streaming, you have quite often the option of configuring your buffer, and you have that time to breathe. But if you're talking real time, in Zoom or something like that, then I think that might be just a different set of experience. Right now, I think it again can work when it works, but real time would be a different kettle of fish.
All right, next question.
Liberty White of Atlanta, Georgia. What are your thoughts on YouTube Shorts? How are you using it in your marketing strategy?
Jeffrey.
I'm really not. The biggest problem with all those little short type things like TikTok and things like that is they cross-platform super, because you don't want them to have to make one for TikTok, make one for Instagram, make one for Facebook, make one for YouTube. So it's basically just make one and then copy paste it across the board. And sometimes it doesn't work because one will let you do up to 3 minutes and another one will let you do only a minute and a half, and another one will let you do 10 seconds of the short. There's also the biggest thing, the biggest advantage would be is if you're doing the across the board YouTube monetization and you want to do the YouTube monetization as well, you stay away from, I think it was one time called freebooting, but whatever it's called now, and that's where you take somebody else's video and put it onto your channel. And then and work on your own content, and then chop up your own content. That's where you can really start to make some waves off of that.
Ken?
Yeah, some of my clients have been using it on YouTube. They're seeing very good uptake on that when they make a short piece in the YouTube short format. It's the numbers are pretty good.
Rupert.
As a viewer, I can say I don't like being marketed to on YouTube. I pay good money to avoid being marketed to, avoiding the ads. So anything that's like a marketing material, it just turns me off.
Alex?
Yeah, I've been a big fan. I mean, I've worked on a lot of marketing, content marketing campaigns that have been there. Most of the stuff we generate is all 16:9, and then they're center sliced, or actually pan and scanned inside of that 16:9. I think the only one I have personally up there is my kids did one. It's under the McDubbies, and if you look at it on TikTok and on YouTube, you'll see one where they're talking. It's some clip from a movie, and you'll see two versions: a 16:9 and a 9:16 in TikTok. And anyway, so we did that to show them how we do that. Anyway, so but the thing, to get back to what Rupert was talking about. The most important thing is that it's all protein. Like, you don't need to talk about, just you want to develop a relationship with your viewers, and that relationship is based on you giving them something of value. So you asking for something immediately or anytime is really, if you build up that value, things will start popping out the other end. And so, having lots of how-tos, one of the things we're going to do for office hours is we're not going to talk much about office hours, but there'll be a ton of shorts on the new platform of like, here's how to do this thing, here's how to do this thing, and they won't be short. I mean, they won't necessarily take the YouTube shorts. They'll just be short form videos, but they'll be showing you lots of things that are easily digestible and easy to grab onto, and some of it might make it onto TikTok and so on and so forth. But I think that's the and then you're building that relationship with the video.
All right, next question.
Vincent Alvarez in Bellingham, Washington asked the question, is there a way to record ISOs, maybe within Zoom? Recording a virtual roundtable that I plan to edit with lower thirds, etc. Basically no budget, however, may have access to university's Zoom events or webinar license if this helps with more ability.
Ken.
Yeah, best way I've found to getting ISOs of each individual is actually not using Zoom. It's riverside.fm. That records, makes a local record of the video and audio, and then after your event, they all then get uploaded to one to Riverside, and then you can download those. So that way you can get the best that they can deliver to you, and each as individual ISOs. So riverside.fm.
All right, David.
And for the budget conscious, if you have hardware you can throw at it, just create the event and have set up the pin farm. That's the old school way.
Alex?
Yeah, the other thing you can do is, again, not zero budget, but not very much budget, is using Zoom ISO. You can get 4 outputs per Mac Mini. So there's a little bit of a cost there to get that all set up. It's about $1,500 per 4 outputs. So you think about $400 per output to do that. But what you're getting there is the 1080p out of each one of those, theoretically, if the account is set up for 1080p. You can then run those into, and you can also use HDMIs out of those, but you can run them into something like a Zoom ISO, a Mini Extreme ISO. And now you can just record them all in H.264 as ISOs, and they'll come in, they'll all be timed, and you'll be able to cut from there.
All right, next question.
Robert Harris of Minneapolis, Minnesota, looking to use a Canon 7D as a webcam. Canon now has a driver that allows a video out connection that can be accessed for streaming. Is it better to take the camera HDMI out, even modified by Magic Lantern?
TJ.
If you already have a device that will allow you to bring in the HDMI signal, such as an ATEM Mini, or you're planning to get one, take a look at your HDMI out and see if it's clean. You can just do that by plugging the camera into a TV and looking at and making sure you're not getting any of the numbers that you might see telling you what your exposure is or your shutter speed is. If the HDMI feed is clean and you have that ability, I would use that. If you don't, then look into the driver for the webcam.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, the biggest problem with taking it out of the USB is you're not going to get the best quality as if you were to do the HDMI out with a clean feed. If your camera, which I believe the 7D does have clean feed out HDMI wise. So I would do that through the capture card.
All right, next question.
Morgan Price of Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. What are the panel's experience with live audio-only events, spoken word presentations, or info sharing versus music events? Clubhouse has gotten a bad reputation. How could it be better for those kinds of events?
Jeffrey.
Well, the biggest thing is to be able to control it. And that's the problem that Clubhouse has, is you can't control who comes in, who leaves. We used to do a lot of audio-only streaming back in the day because we were podcast only at that time, and we had a lot of great conversations, and we had to bring people in via the phone at that time, but it was still great conversations because we controlled the full narrative.
Alex?
Yeah, exactly what Jeffrey said. You really, the biggest problem with the audio is that you have to have all these extra tools. There was an old app called Talk Show that a bunch of us used, I don't know, 10 or 12 years ago. And those are the kind of things, but you could see it, you could queue people up for questions, you could bring them all in, and we haven't seen that to be very effective. What we did find worked in Clubhouse was to use Makana. So we used Makana as the back end for Clubhouse, and then it worked perfectly. So it's just a matter of finding a way to seamlessly maintain flow control.
All right, next question.
Rupert McRae of Dallas, Texas, USA. Has anyone researched or studied virtual body language cues or techniques for video collaboration like in Zoom?
Alex.
I don't know if I've done formal study on it, but one thing I pay a lot of attention to in meetings is how I present myself in those. I do not do other things other than taking notes. If I'm not the only one, if I'm the only one in there, I'll take notes. Otherwise, I won't take any notes. I'll just simply pay attention. I nod a lot. As far as a nonverbal cue, it's super effective, to get people to feel comfortable and everything else. So you'll see if they're not doing something I agree with, I don't nod. But if they're doing something, if they're saying something, you're understanding it or whatever, giving them some kind of virtual, otherwise they kind of feel like they're in a void, and it really makes the conversation flow a lot better to give people those nonverbal cues.
That was the big problem with education, and is like when you're looking at a screen full of black squares, you don't know if the kids are getting it or if they're paying attention. But then there were so many other issues to have to weave around that it made it really difficult. Rupert?
Yeah, there's some folks out there that talk about this subject. I know there's someone that talks regularly to Zoom, like Zoom new employees, about this. They've got an event coming up next week. I'll put a link in the chat.
Alex?
When thinking about nonverbal cues and when you're in a meeting, the thing to remember is that, this has been a lot of research, is someone who is excited to be around you. They don't do it because of how they feel about you. It's how they feel about themselves when they're with you. That is and people don't get that. And that's a well-known thing when you, and so people getting positive reinforcement while they're talking in a meeting, they want you to be in the meeting more often. They want to talk to you more often. They want to have more conversations with you.
All right, next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, what would be the most comfortable N95 FFP2 mask to wear for long periods? I'd prefer a reusable mask.
David?
Yeah, as a bespeckled mask wearer, I highly recommend the Oakley MSK3. It's a reusable shell, and you can actually take standard NF95s and mount them in there. The little wire thing mounts nicely, gets a nice seal, keeps from fogging up.
Nice. TJ?
Many of you know about the construction project I had last year, and I spent many, many days, 12-hour plus days, wearing 3M N95 masks. I pretty much think 3M owns the market on personal protection.
Ken?
Yeah, just +1 on the Oakley mask.
Nice. Alex?
+2. I don't have it here because it sits in my car the whole time. After David recommended it in an earlier show, I went and bought it, and I love it. Like, it's comfortable. I can wear it all day. It's got enough structure that it sits away from your mouth. So that's always my thing. It doesn't push up against me. If I put my glasses in the right way, it won't fog them, and I can swap out the filters.
Nice.
I swap them out every week or two.
Yeah, I found that I stopped buying the Oakley specific ones because most other ones will grab those little Velcro-y bits in there and stay pretty.
We'll trade notes because I'm still buying the Oakley ones. I'm always like, these are so expensive, but I still use them. So but it is. I have probably gone through 30 different masks because I have to wear them for 10 or 12 hours a day in production, and it's the best one. Excellent.
All right. Next question.
Ernest Floyd from Bastrop, Louisiana. Has anyone used Google Fi, the United States and Europe, and what are your thoughts on it? I want to use it for my hotspots.
John?
I've only used it in the United States. For my area, it's covered by T-Mobile, which can be spotty coverage for me. I'm typically going to AT&T or Verizon for my hotspots. And I'm just researching if I'm traveling somewhere, what's the kind of best for the area. And if they're both great, then I can kind of bond them together, get an even more reliable experience.
All right. Next question.
Next question from Tony Mobley of Newnan, Georgia. I'm having trouble using GVM Lite's remote control iOS app. Will not allow to log in on iPhone or Mac Mini M1.
Jeffrey?
So what he's saying there is GVM has an app, and of course, in order for you to use it, you have to create an account and log in that way. I don't think they have a Mac version of that, so it would have to be the iOS or Android version. The thing with those lights is that GVM is just a brand name that gets slapped onto the light, and then of course the app is they're doing. They have to control it. So the Neewer and all these other ones, they basically get these lights from somebody who's actually building it, and they'll have a chip in there, and then they'll have to usually have to develop that app to work from there. So I've looked at the ratings on the GVM app, and they are not great. There's been a lot of people that have had that same problem. So the only thing you can really do is wait for an update, or I suppose return them. It would be the other option.
All right, great. That brings us to the end of our first hour today on Saturday, and we're going to jump into our educator hour. So we're going to say goodbye to YouTube. Bye, YouTube. Hopefully. And we'll bring our educators in to do their mic checks. And Alex, what do you think? 8:15?